Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Ms. Arias, you are still under oath. Do you understand?
Yes.
I'm going to continue to ask you the questions submitted by the jury. Several times while testifying about the abuse by Travis, you have made comments like, "as I understand it now," and "I've come to realize." How has this realization come about?
Because about almost 5 years have passed, just the farther away I get from the situation, the more perspective I have. Whereas before I constantly made excuses for him. Now I understand that the things that occurred were not okay. And, forgiving him is different from continually putting up with it. So in hindsight, the farther away I get from the situation, the more perspective I have of those events and the abuse.
Were individuals involved in helping you come to these realizations?
Sometimes spiritual leaders, things like that. It's mostly just reflection on the incidents.
Tell us who they are and what their professions may be.
These were individuals with the church. I don't know what their professions are, but they come to where I live, and they counsel me spiritually, things like that. Most of them are from the Mormon church. There's also a lady from the Baptist church who continues to visit me regularly.
You are recalling times of memory loss with Travis. How is it possible you remember such details from those days if you had a foggy memory?
I'm sorry, can you reread that, please?
You were recalling times of memory loss with Travis. How is it possible you remember such details from those days if you had a foggy memory?
The fog or the confusion only begins when he starts screaming, or if there's a fear that maybe there's going to be tension or some kind of escalation of anger or violence. And then certain incidents, such as the physical pain, is crystallized in my mind. So that sticks. And then also there are journal entries that I've made that remind me of that day and details of that day. So it helps me remember, oh yeah, that day I did this before I went to Travis's house. I remember it was around this time, or this day of the week. So I did review my journals constantly over the years, and that's given me perspective as far as, things like that. So the confusion comes in when he begins to get angry.
Is there anyone else who knows about your memory issues?
Well, again, I think I have a really excellent memory. Just the issue.
Anyone else knows not choosing the next one.
Answer the question as stated.
Oh, it's hard because I don't think I have memory issues.
All right, then that's your answer. Did Travis's roommates ever hear these altercations to your knowledge?
I'm not sure about that.
To your knowledge, did anyone else hear your altercations?
Yes, they have. That would be Dan Freeman heard the last tail end of the altercation the morning we went to have soup pie. He came into the bedroom as Travis was storming out of the bedroom. So there was that, and then also in the car. We had pulled over, and it was actually so I could use the bathroom in the forest rather than take pictures. But that led to an argument. When I came back to the car, he had locked me out. Travis locked me out, so he saw that. I just went and sat by the side of the road and waited for him to open the door, and he lost patience, and he came out of the car, and I came back in, but it led to an argument over that. So Dan and Desiree were witness to that. I don't know if they saw any other arguments, and I don't think anyone else that, to my knowledge, would have seen any.
You have testified about several incidents where Travis was physical to you. Were you ever physical to Travis besides when you killed him?
I think when he was choking me, my hands were free. He was over my torso. My arms were free. So I may have tried to push him off or I didn't want to injure him. I just wanted him to get off of me, but that was very quick and it didn't last long.
Would you consider the event when Travis choked you a stressful event?
Certainly, yes.
If yes, why do you recall the event so clearly?
I recall up to the point where he was choking me and passing out. I had disorientation after I woke up. I had to get my bearings. I wasn't sure where I was. Then I recognized Travis's bedroom. I was laying on my side coughing, and so I saw the carpet.
No response as to how she's able to relate it today.
She's explaining it, Your Honor.
Overruled. You may continue.
So I was experiencing disorientation. I wasn't thinking, gosh, Travis just choked me out. Actually, a thought sort of wandered through my mind. I said, where's Napoleon, in my head? That was my thought. So it didn't really have any relation to the event. That was just a thought. I was kind of getting my bearings. So it's not completely clear. I just remember he had his hands around my neck and he was banging my head on the carpet. And I tried to push him off, and then I blacked out really shortly after that.
In the moments of stress or fog, how do you recall what happened in those moments if it affects your memory?
I don't recall clearly what happens in those moments, as far as details, every detail. Sometimes I have a general sense of what's going on, and sometimes I don't. But as far as the fog goes, it's more, again, just words that are being spoken or screamed or yelled, and processing that sort of thing. Physical things I can remember because I feel them physically. I can remember what I feel internally and emotionally as well, but it's more the words that are being spoken and their meanings, but I do remember what I feel, if that makes sense.
Why were you afraid of the consequences if you killed Travis in self-defense?
I believed that it's not okay in any circumstance to take someone's life, even if you're defending your own life. That's how I believed it. So I never really stopped to consider how society would view it. If someone is defending themselves, I just felt like I had done something wrong, and I was afraid of what the consequences would be.
What happened to the gas cans after the road trip in June of 2008?
They went back to my grandmother's house, where I went back to eventually, and I was taking a road trip to Monterey and had intended to bring them to Darrell, but I never made it to that road trip.
Regarding shaking memory, foggy reaction. Number one, do you always have a reaction as you described when someone corrects or challenges you?
I do now. I've gotten a little bit better and a little bit stronger. It's a condition that started again in November 2007 and continued. It continues to this day, but I've gotten a little better about it.
Number two, is this the same reaction you have when someone yells or raises their voice at you?
Yes, for the most part. Sometimes someone might yell and it's done and over with, and it doesn't make me shake, but the majority of the time it does.
Number three, have you ever had any situations where you have raised your voice?
Yes, probably 1,000,000 times.
You mentioned the pain of sex is one of the reasons you brought KY into the relationship. What are the other reasons?
Well, for example, on direct, I think I mentioned that it facilitates our activities a little bit better. It makes them more enjoyable and, of course, less painful.
During these altercations, why didn't you just scream in hopes that someone would hear you and help you?
I did scream. I wasn't thinking of somebody helping me. For example, I screamed when he threw me on the floor and started kicking me. I was unable to scream when he had his hands around my windpipes. And I'm sure I was screaming on June 4th.
I'm handing you Exhibit 164. What was the date and time stamped on Exhibit 164?
1:42 and 53 seconds p.m.
And the date?
I'm sorry, it was 6:4:08.
If you were scared of what Travis was capable of doing, why would you ever let him tie you up?
When that occurred, he was in a very good mood, and he wasn't displaying any signs of agitation. And that was the Travis that I liked and was not afraid of. The moment he began to get angry, my warning bells started to go off, and I began to get cautious, for lack of a better term. But he hadn't displayed any of that. We just woke up. We were getting along. So, and again, they were loose enough to wiggle out of. So I wasn't like stuck there at his mercy, so to speak.
Was Travis tied up at any point on June 4, 2008?
No.
Do you recall the injuries on Travis's body at any point during June 4 without the aid of photographs?
No, I didn't even realize that I shot him.
You mentioned that one of the reasons you chose not to write negative things in your journal was because you were concerned that Travis would read it. Is that correct?
That's correct. After October, I didn't write anything else negative. He found it. This would be late October, early November, and said that's not in line with the secret being the law of attraction, and made me tear it out. So at that point, I was into the law of attraction. I agreed with him. I figured he's right, and honestly, I felt really bad because that's the first time he'd ever heard me say something, write something negative about him. I'd never said negative things toward him or about him. I always edified him positively behind his back, and I felt like, kind of like I'd been caught saying something very bad about him, so I didn't do that anymore.
If that is the case, why were you okay with leaving an entry in your journal that talked about how Travis would get angry if he knew you had gone to Rachel's house?
That would have been in late August or early September that I wrote that, and this argument that occurred would be late October, and the subsequent lecturing of writing negative things occurred after that, maybe later in October, late, or early November.
Why was it okay to write about how Travis made you both sick and happy, or sad and miserable, or that something wasn't right about him?
That was a very mild way of how I sometimes felt about that darker side of him, as far as sick or miserable, as far as just the emotional turmoil and the pedophilia. And so that was also a side of him that, again, he was trying to overcome and eradicate. So at the same time, he had beautiful sides to him. So what I was doing in that is I was listing the contrast of the range of emotions that I felt when I was with him.
After you snatched the gun off the shelf, did you do anything to the gun, such as cock it, slip off the safety, manipulate a slide, or anything prior to it going off?
I don't even think I would know how to do that, so the answer is I don't know. Probably not. I just grabbed it and pointed it, is what I remember.
Had you ever had any firearms training or fired a .25 caliber pistol prior to this event?
Never fired a gun, but I was relatively familiar with them. Not formally trained, but relatively familiar. Just, I don't know, not formally trained.
How far away from you was Travis when the gun went off? Not when he lunged, but when the gun went off.
The lunging and the gun going off was sort of contemporaneous. I don't remember how close they were or if they happened exactly at the same moment. or one right after the other. It would all happen very fast, and it all seemed to happen all at once. And I would say as far as distance, maybe as far as Mr. Babick is, but I couldn't say for sure, for absolute certainty.
You stated that you remember throwing the gun into the desert, but do you remember what happened to the box it was in?
No, I do not.
What about the holster you mentioned?
I only saw the holster before I moved. I didn't see it again after that.
Did he keep extra ammunition with the gun?
I never saw ammunition next to the gun, and I never found any in the house when I was cleaning.
If Travis lunged at you, why didn't you just move to the side out of his way?
Well, it happened very fast. I didn't have time to think. Everything just happened, it seemed, in a split second. So I just didn't have time to think, move this way or that way, or back up, or do this or that. It just happened the way it happened without really thinking about the best move to make.
You remember dropping the knife and screaming, but you don't remember taking the gun or rope with you. Is that correct?
In a sense, that's correct. I remember that, dropping the knife and screaming, and that memory came much later.
It's actually already started.
I'm sorry.
No.
Can I
Overruled.
start?
Overruled.
Okay.
May continue.
But it goes blank after that. I don't remember putting the gun in the car. I don't remember putting the rope in the car. But I have, not crystal clear, but pretty solid memories of disposing of those things. So they did go in the car, obviously, but I don't remember placing them in the car.
You are stating you believe you stabbed Travis based on logic. How do you explain the blood on your hands and clothes and the bloody palm print on the wall?
Well, I do know that we struggled that day, and I mean, based on logic, it would have been because of how we fought. I don't know how things ended up where they ended up. I just know that we were fighting physically.
If you were kneeling when you dropped the camera, how did it roll as far as it did?
It didn't really roll very far. It just kind of gave a bounce or two and maybe rolled like right here. It didn't roll very far.
Was Travis sitting down when you dropped the camera?
Yes, he was. I think so.
How did Travis's anger escalate after you shot him?
I don't remember the words he was saying, but he was angrier. He was screaming more. He was cursing more. And we had fallen over right after that shot occurred, and he was grabbing at my clothes and grabbing at me. And again, as soon as I broke away, he threatened my life, so that was definitely an escalation in his anger. That's how I interpreted it.
Was he chasing you after you shot him in the head?
Right after the shot occurred, we had fallen over in the bathroom, again toward the sink and garbage can area, kind of in the corner. So he didn't chase me in that moment, but that's where we struggled on the floor. And again, as soon as I broke away and he said, "Effing kill you, bitch," I don't remember a lot after that. So whether he chased me or not, I couldn't say.
When you purchased gas at the Arco in Pasadena, why didn't you just fill everything up at the pump so that it was all under one transaction? Why do 3 separate transactions?
Well, what I do recall is when I filled the gas cans, rather than have just a loose gas hose somewhere, I didn't have anywhere to put it. So I hung it up. And when I hung it up, that ends the transaction. So that's probably why, if I could have put them back in the trunk or wherever, and then started the car, or vice versa. At one point, I didn't want to just set it on the ground, so I hung it up. I know that ended the transaction. So that's probably why there was more than one, and maybe I was topping off the gas tank for another.
During your testimony about the abuse by Travis, you have made several comments like, "As I understand it now," or "I've come to realize," when discussing events that you may not have classified as abuse then, but see it as such now. Have you utilized professional help?
I have not had access to professional help. No, I haven't utilized that.
Did you enjoy having sex with Travis?
For the most part, yes, I did, very much.
Did he force you to do things you didn't want to do?
There were things I was uncomfortable with. I didn't feel altogether forced. I went along with it. So he didn't physically force me or anything like that.
Why did you wait for so long to tell the truth?
Again, it took a long time. It took a long time for me to get to this point. I never wanted to admit to this. And I'd written out all my suicide letters. I sent my note. I sent them all in an envelope to my grandmother's. Do not open until November 10th, 2008. I was hoping to be dead by then. I was like giving myself a little time to get my affairs in order. That date rolled by, and then more time rolled by, and I was still here. So with the evolution of just time and the years, couple of years that went by, it was a gradual process, and I began to feel not right about keeping it in instead.
How many times did you try to kill yourself?
I believe that was in California when I took apart my razor, and was going to do that. That was the only serious attempt I've made. Other than that, it's just like ideation, thinking how I might be able to do this or that, things like that.
Would you decide to tell the truth if you never got arrested?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
You said that one of your worst fears was for everyone to find out what was going on in your relationship. So why did you talk to 48 Hours and other TV stations?
My attempt to talk to them was to present a better image of our relationship and downplay the negative aspects as not really a big deal. It wasn't that bad, that kind of thing. Oh yeah, I knew that he did that, but that wasn't a big deal. Even our arguments, oh sure, there was turmoil, it was rocky, but we were friends. So my attempt was more to present a good image of Travis and a good image of myself, and that our relationship had its ups and downs, but we were still on good terms.
You stated in the interview with Detective Flores that Travis liked to shave the old-fashioned way. This would normally include use of a traditional straight razor. Did Travis own or use a straight razor?
I don't think he did. When I said traditional way, I'm not overly familiar with the process of how men shave their faces. I just know that he really got into it. So I think he used something that would be like a Bic, actually.
Judge, like a what?
A Bic razor.
In testimony on March 5, 2013, you mentioned filling a third gas can. When and where did you get this can?
Can you reread that? I'm sorry.
In testimony on March 5, 2013, you mentioned filling a third gas can. When and where did you get this can?
March 5. I believe that was a hypothetical. I had a third can when I originally purchased one in Salinas. I returned it before leaving Salinas. So what we were doing is throwing out a hypothetical as to why would I only put 2 gallons in a third tank or third can. So that was a hypothetical. I only had 2 gas cans with me.
Why didn't you just run out of the house instead of grabbing the gun from the closet?
Well, again, I can't it happened so fast. I did initially think run, so that's why I went down the hallway. And then right as I got to the hallway with the doors being shut, it just seemed like more of an obstacle. It would give him more time to catch up, to open the door this way and run around it and out when this door was in equal distance and open, and I could just run that way and into it. So my thought maybe initially was to run out the other door and then around and out, but just something to create more distance, because last time I'd run that same route, I was not successful in running out of the room.
You said when the gun went off, you weren't sure if you shot Travis. So when you came out of the fog on your way to Utah, why didn't you call 911 to help Travis?
When I sort of came out of the fog, I realized, oh crap, something bad had happened, and I was scared to call any authority at that point.
All right, counsel, please approach. There's some additional questions from the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask that you go back to the jury room for approximately 5 minutes, and then we will bring you back. Please remember the admonition.
Please stand for the jury.
Yes, the record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ms. Arias, you may step down, and counsel, you may approach. Yeah, I think that's about as much. Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Why would you hypothesize about filling a third gas can?
I was just answering the question I was asked, so I don't know why there was a hypothesis there.
You stated today that you did not have professional help when dealing with your issues, yet yesterday you mentioned talking to a psychiatrist to deal with Travis's possible child porn issues. Can you explain?
Can you read that last part again, or you can read the whole thing if you want?
You stated today that you did not have professional help when dealing with your issues, yet yesterday you mentioned talking to a psychiatrist to deal with Travis's possible child porn issues. Can you explain?
Yes. It was actually, I believe, a psychologist, and it wasn't to deal with the issues. That wasn't for professional help. That was for an evaluation of me, not counseling of any kind.
You say you waited 2 years to tell the truth because you were ashamed. Does that mean you are no longer ashamed?
No, that doesn't. I'm still very deeply ashamed. It simply means that it became more difficult to deal with holding it in because, like I said, the feeling of being fraudulent was so great I couldn't hold it in any longer.
Did you look into the possibility of renting a GPS system along with a rental car?
I believe it was offered. They're typically offered when I've rented cars in the past, but it costs more, and I was trying to save money. So no, I didn't.
In the story of a man and woman attacking Travis, you mentioned talking to him. Also mentioned was Travis being on all fours. Do you in fact recall him doing any of those things?
I do recall him screaming and yelling at me. So I don't know if that constitutes as talking, but he was saying words. The other things, I don't recall as far as being on all fours. I don't.
You claim that everything happened so fast and you didn't have time to think. So how could you think of grabbing the gun from the closet?
What I should have said is I didn't really have time to reflect on what I should do or what I shouldn't do, or what would the consequence be if I did this, X, Y, or Z. So everything happened really fast, and I didn't give it any forethought. I just reacted and did that very quickly.
How can you say that you don't have memory issues when you can't remember how you stabbed him so many times and slashed his throat?
Well, I think that I have a good memory, and June 4th is an anomaly for me. It's like I said yesterday, it's in a class of its own, and I can't explain what kind of state of mind I was in. It was, the most of the day was an entire blank, and little pieces have come back, but not very many. So I can't explain that day alone, but if you were to put that day over here, all the other days of my life, I don't think I have memory issues that are any different from another average person.
Did Mr. Martinez cause you to shake during his questioning?
Yes.
If so, can you please provide an estimate of how many times this happened during the current trial?
During the current trial, it happened on the day of opening statements. I remember that. It happened almost every day. It was most intense on the first day of cross.
After all the lies you have told, why should we believe you now?
Lying isn't typically something I just do. I'm not going to say that I've never told a lie in my life before this incident, but the lies that I've told in this case can be tied directly back to either protecting Travis's reputation or my involvement in his death in any way, because I was very ashamed of the death, and also I wanted to edify Travis in a good way. I didn't want to de-edify him or say hateful things about him, especially now that he had passed away. And I also didn't want that to be construed as motive, for example, if he was violent with me.
What happened to the suicide letters you wrote to your grandmother?
I mailed them to my grandmother, and I asked her to hold them.
How could you kiss another man when you knew what you just did to Travis?
Again, my state of mind wasn't right at that time. This was just hours afterward. And one of the reasons I went to Utah is because it was expected of me. And I thought by not showing up, it would look even more suspicious. And when I got there, Ryan and I had talked extensively about things we might do when we get there, including being romantic. Not sexual, but romantic. Things we would, maybe dinner, hikes, things like that. Part of me felt that that was expected of me. If I went there and just showed up as a total ice queen and didn't want to touch him or have anything to do with him, he might think that's strange. And so part of that was an attempt to appear normal. Also, when I was with Ryan, I felt a sense of safety. He wasn't pressuring me for sex, and I didn't think he was going to haul off and smack me if I said the wrong thing or did something that displeased him. But again, even with all of those things, I wasn't in my right state of mind during that time.
Were you in the fog when you were kissing Ryan?
Yes.
Would you agree that you came away from the June 4 incident rather unscathed, while Travis suffered a gunshot and multiple stab wounds? You only had a bump on your head, a bruise on your head, cuts or scrapes on your ankles, and a possible shoulder injury.
As far as making comparison of physical injuries, him versus mine, yes, I would have to say that's a relatively accurate assessment.
Ladies and gentlemen, are there any other questions from the jury at this time? Mr. Nurmi, you may follow up.
Thank you. Ms. Arias, yesterday you were asked about receiving the Book of Mormon from Travis. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you were explaining to us how you read a chapter a day of that book, or basically a chapter a day after you received it. Do you recall telling us that?
Yes.
Okay. And there were some other questions about, or answers, I guess, that brought up the visits from the missionaries that came over to your house in Palm Desert. Do you recall those questions?
Yes.
Okay. And what the basis of some of these questions really related to the law of chastity. Do you recall that?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you talked about in answering these questions as it relates to the Book of Mormon, does that contain a sort of list of, as it relates to premarital sex, of activities that are okay and activities that are not okay?
Not in the Book of Mormon. It's broad. It's not listed out in detail in the Book of Mormon.
For example, the Book of Mormon doesn't say oral sex is okay or not okay. It doesn't spell that out for you.
No, it does not.
Okay. You mentioned the missionaries being younger men that came to your house. Younger men, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And this kind of do's and don'ts list, we'll call it, that wasn't in the Book of Mormon, did they give you anything of that nature?
No, I had pamphlets, but they didn't have, as far as the law of chastity goes, that was not broken down, no.
What they explained to you from your answers, it seems to be that you weren't to engage in premarital sex. Your takeaway of that was penile vaginal intercourse. Is that accurate?
Well, I considered other forms of sex, but after gaining a sort of clarification from Travis and how he explained it, then I came to understand that vaginal sex was the ultimate, place to not go until marriage.
Okay. And in terms of going to this place, meaning penile vaginal intercourse, after these missionaries started coming over, were you still engaging in sex with Darrell Brewer after they came over and started telling you these things?
No.
And part of what we heard in your questioning is that Travis served to provide you with elaboration, if you will, on the law of chastity. Is that true?
Yeah, he delineated it more for me.
So that kind of list of using oral sex as a continued example, this oral sex is okay or not okay, he kind of provided that checklist for you, right?
Yes.
Okay. And based on his teachings, if you will, you came away from that with the idea that the law of chastity only restricted penile vaginal intercourse.
During
After Travis taught you these things, what was your understanding of what the law of chastity prohibited?
the law of chastity prohibited vaginal intercourse between a man and a woman, and that it should be saved for marriage. That was the black and white of the issue on that.
Okay. Now we heard, as you answered these questions and throughout your testimony, of another guiding principle in your life being the law of attraction. You were asked a few questions about that. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And one of the things that came up while you were describing the law of attraction, I want to make sure it's clear, you also started talking about something called the secret. So is the secret part of the law of attraction, or could you just kind of explain that for all of us?
The Secret is a documentary film that came out in 2006 explaining the law of attraction, so they're synonymous. And there was another movie version that came out in 2007, also The Secret, just a different speaker, but it's the same, it's exactly the same thing. It's the law of attraction.
So The Secret, was that something that you and Travis, this movie, documentary as you call it, is that something you and Travis watched together or tried to adhere to together?
Yes, he introduced me to the movie.
He introduced you to the movie, but the law of attraction was something that you were familiar with before you met Travis. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit yesterday about your breakups with your boyfriends, and I kind of want to go back through that a little bit, okay?
Okay.
You began with Bobby Juarez dating, if you will, what have you, around age 15, correct?
That's correct. The first time.
What's that?
The first time, yes.
Okay.
I was 15.
And you mentioned when you were answering the questions posed to you yesterday that you broke up with him and got back together a few times over the years. Could you kind of explain that to us?
Yes. Starting at age 15, I broke up with him because I felt the relationship was getting too serious. I didn't talk to him for a few more years. And then when I had called him and he wasn't responsive, I let that go. And then he called me back and we struck up a conversation and a friendship again. And then some months later, that blossomed into a romantic relationship, and I began to fall in love with him. And he's who I would consider my first real true love. And then when the other girl came into the picture, I broke up with him. We got back together. She actually came in and out of the picture a few times. She came from Louisiana, so I broke up with him. There were many things that caused us to break up. Sometimes he would get on his feet and have friends that would help him out, and he didn't want anything to do with me. And then other times, it had to do with that girl or just some little things. But it seemed that we were always getting back together. And then finally, we separated. And then 2 weeks went by where we didn't talk. And I felt like that was sufficient time. Whereas in Costa Rica, when I'd gone there, it was 8 days. I felt that was sufficient time, but he came back into my job. And we started talking again, and we got into the same pattern again. And then some months later, I didn't see or hear from him for 2 weeks, and then I received an email from him. And I called it. He left a phone number in the email. I went to a payphone, so he didn't have my phone number, and called it, and we spoke for a little while. And it wasn't a heated conversation, but we eventually just said some things that we needed to say and hung up, and that was the end of it.
Okay. And this conversation you just spoke of when you were in the phone booth, how old were you then when you finally ended things with Mr. Juarez?
I was 20.
And
I'm sorry, I was 19. I was almost 20.
okay. Then this, you spoke yesterday about this occasion when you were giving him, you gave him groceries after you broke up on one occasion, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Was that after this last phone call, or was this before this last phone call?
It was before. I don't remember exactly what time period or even what time of the year, but it was during one of the several breakups that we had, or after that.
And after this phone conversation, when you were about 19 in this phone booth, there were no more attempts to contact, you didn't make any more attempts to contact him. Is that what you're telling us?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you were asked also about Victor Arias yesterday. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And for a little bit of clarification, and based on what you told us, it sounds like Victor was a gentleman that you became involved with sometime when you were in an off period with Mr. Juarez. Is that accurate?
It was during a period where I never thought I'd see or hear from Bobby again or even contact him. Yes.
Okay. You were asked about a trip you made to spend time with his Victor's family in Costa Rica. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe if we step back a little bit, what were the circumstances? You met Victor in Costa Rica, right?
Yes, I flew to Costa Rica when I was 16, and he and his mother and father and 2 sisters and his other brother were at the airport to meet me and pick me up.
Okay, and how did that come about that you just go to Costa Rica and spend time with this family?
This was right after my sophomore year, and in September, at the beginning of my sophomore year, there was some flyers put up and it was announced, and it just sounded so exciting to me. So I went home and told my parents, I'm going to Costa Rica, and they just looked at me like I was crazy. But what I did is I worked at my dad's restaurant and saved up all the money I could for the trip, and I think my parents threw a little money toward the trip for me as well. And I was very shocked that they were okay with it and that they let me go, but that's how it came about.
Okay. So is it accurate then to surmise that this was some sort of exchange program with host families?
Yes, it wasn't a long-term exchange, but it was considered an exchange. They have some kind of rotating semester system, so they go to school in the summer as well. And I went to school with them during the day and did things, extracurricular activities on the weekends.
So you met Victor when you met this the entire Costa Rican Arias family, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so when you went to visit, we talked about the continued contact with Victor, the correspondence. Was there still then a friendship with his family?
Yes, we emailed on occasion, just his brother and sister. Not all the family members had emails, and Victor would email my mom. They would email back and forth.
And so we're clear, was going back to Costa Rica to clear your head, as you told us about many days ago, was that a matter of trying to rekindle things with Victor, or was this just, was that on the agenda, I guess?
No, I was not interested in rekindling anything with Victor. I was interested in maintaining a friendship, but not a romantic relationship.
As it relates to the overall question of your breakups throughout your life, you also had a breakup with Matt McCartney, right?
Yes.
Okay. And we heard about the conversation you had with Bianca and how he was unfaithful to you. You learned that through that conversation. Do you recall telling us about that?
Yes.
Okay. That breakup then, you had a conversation with Mr. McCartney after you spoke with Bianca. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. Tell us again how that conversation took place, and if you could, just the kind of content of the conversation.
I went to his father's house when he returned from Borrego Springs, and when I arrived, he was on the phone with Bianca, so he understood what I was there for. So we decided to leave the duplex where his father was living in so that he wasn't privy to our business. And we went into my car, which was parked on the street, and just sat in there and had a conversation regarding that. We were both crying. We hugged. We were sad that it was over, but we knew it was over. And it was sad, actually, but it wasn't volatile or anything like that.
It wasn't volatile, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. As far as after that conversation when you broke up, did you disconnect yourself from Mr. McCartney for a while? Did you still converse right away? Just kind of describe for us the period after that breakup.
Well, a day or two after the breakup, I sent him an email. It was a really long email. Just one of the ways I processed things then was by writing everything down or emailing it. So I sent him that email, kind of like a goodbye email, just letting him know, in hindsight, in retrospect, this is how I feel about our relationship and how it ultimately ended up. And then beyond that, I think I spoke with him one time on the phone, but we went for about a month without talking.
Okay. So you go for a month without talking after you send this email, then you strike up a friendship. Is that, or a friendship builds? But maybe just describe that for us.
I don't recall exactly how we even rekindled our friendship. I do know that he was looking for seasonal work, and when he found out I was going to be staying in a campground, he's like, oh no, he didn't like that idea. So he came with me, not as an intention to try to get back together with me or vice versa, but to gain employment, also make sure that I was safe. I think that was my impression, but he really was looking for work as well.
You mentioned, and it was questioned of you yesterday, this idea that eventually this man who you'd been involved with sexually, you got to a point where you viewed him more as a brother. Is there a way for you to put into words how you got to that point?
I think with time progressing and the separation, it would have been spring, I think 2002, because it was the following spring that I was hired. And I remember Matt and I broke up around September 11th, 2001. So it was that following spring that Ventana closed. The restaurant closed. And so when the restaurant closed, Matt's income went away. And so he moved to Vail, Colorado for other seasonal work. And I stayed there and did little odds and ends things to continue earning a little bit of money. And he stayed in Vail for a while. And when I think the season was up there, he came back to Ventana. and was rehired because he had been a good employee. And with that space, I think he had a trailer, and I went over there just to visit him briefly, and we kind of just laughed and joked a little, and he thought my blonde hair was weird because I didn't have blonde hair before he left, and then I did. So, yeah, we just kind of were comfortable with each other, but we were no longer intimate or physical. We don't even really hug often, or we didn't. And so we just kind of had a level of understanding that it feels like another life, to be honest, having dated him. That was then, and we're different now, and we respect the fact that we each have a past, and that past is in the past. And we're able to maintain a friendship.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please be back in the jury room at 1:25. Please remember the admonition. You are excused. Have a nice lunch. The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Miss Arias, you may step down. Counsel, before you leave, could I see you at the bench for just a moment?